大家好，我是 Shang Guan Jie Wen, your friendly neighborhood Waiguaren. It is often said that the United States has a very short history by a lot of my friends in China. And I think that is actually true. Columbus didn't even arrive in North America until 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue. I remember having to memorize that in like 3rd grade or something. And so there's not a lot of history of the United States as a government, or of North America. It has been colonized from people elsewhere, not including indigenous Americans, of course. But actually, a lot of university courses on history require people to take a course called Western Civilization. And Western Civilization is the West's attempt to give itself a longer history. And that history starts with Egypt. Very often, when you're taking a Western Civilization course, they start with Egypt, which is, of course, thousands and thousands of years old. So what I'm going to give you right now is Western Civilization in just a few minutes. Behind me, you'll see a giant wooden horse, and let me tell you a little story, an apparently true story, or at least it comes from a book called Oedipus, about the Greek invasion, the ancient Greek invasion after a dark era, invasion of a city called Troy, which many archaeologists claim that they have found. In this story, after bitter years of battling, the Greeks were not able to invade Troy, which had been under siege. So they pretended to run away. They pulled all of their ships away from the coast and hid them elsewhere, while having left this giant wooden horse filled with just a few soldiers hiding inside, just outside of the Trojan gates, the gates to the city Troy. The Trojans came out and saw there was a giant wooden horse, which they assumed meant that the Greeks had evacuated and the Trojans had finally won this protracted siege. However, having taken this horse into the city and gotten drunk on festivities to celebrate the end of the war, soldiers that were hidden inside this wooden horse slipped out in the night and opened the gates to the city from the inside, allowing the Greek armies to rush in and conquer Troy. Therefore, we have the saying, a Trojan horse, which means a present which brings bad tidings. All right, so in this history of Western civilization, after the Trojan War, the Greeks come to power. Now, we're going to get back around to how Egypt fits into this all in a little bit. After the Greeks came to power, there were a few cities, notably Athens and Sparta, that played a huge role in this Western narrative of their history. And they claim that the governance styles that they're modeled after today come from the Greeks. The Greeks brought us things like Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, and eventually they brought us Alexander the Great, who conquered most of the Western world, including and all the way into parts of India. Even today, all over the Middle East and parts of Greece are cities that are named for Alexander. Alexandretta, Alexandria. They're all of these cities named for him. He left this period after his death at the age of 27, the Hellenic period. This Hellenic period eventually collapsed, and then came the Roman Empire. Here we have the Colosseum. The Colosseum represented how the Romans chose to entertain themselves by watching beast and beast, man and beast, and man kill one another inside for the entertainment of Romans all throughout their empire, which is a Mediterranean empire, which brings me back to Egypt. Long saga played out between Egypt, which was one of the retiring powers at that time, and the rising power of Rome. Rome chose to take many Greeks and incorporate them into their society, oftentimes as educators and teachers. Eventually, Rome became a dictatorship under Julius Caesar for a very short time before he was murdered, and his place was taken by Augustus. Interestingly, the months of July and August were added to the calendar at that time, named after Julius Caesar, July, and Augustus Caesar, August, and added to what was formerly 10 months, which became the 12-month calendar that we use in the modern world today. Augustus ruled for almost 30 years and created the Rome that we all know and watch in movies like Gladiator. By as early as 400 or 500 AD, the Roman gods were losing favor in Rome, and part of the empire of the Roman Empire had been moved to Constantinople, or what is known today as Istanbul in Turkey. And eventually the Catholic Church rose to power. The Catholic Church reigned over most of Europe during what we call the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. Aristotelian philosophy, Aristotle, which came from Greece, ruled over that period, and all of the universities erected all over Europe at that time were based on Aristotle's ideas and Aristotelian philosophy. During the Dark Ages, the formula for concrete, which is what sidewalks are made out of today, was lost. The Romans had this formula, but much science was lost during the Dark Ages, including this formula and many other details, including aqueducts and other similar technology. After hundreds of years in these Dark Ages, with wars raging between the Middle East and Europe, eventually people in Italy and Spain began to have what we call a renaissance, and a lot of civilization re-flourished in places like Florence and other parts of Europe. And they began to rediscover what science was and how to make complex chemicals again. And eventually, you end up in 1776 with the founding of the US Republic. And later, you have the French Revolution, 1789, moving forward. Eventually, then Napoleon comes to power, 1795, and things just go crazy in France for a while. But this is the real beginning of the modern set of republics in Western civilization. But an attempt, a narrative to have a longer history, created these Western civilization courses, this idea of Western civilization, which they try to tie all of this Western Europe, the United States, and I'm not sure exactly how Australia fits in there, but they try to squeeze themselves in too, so that they try to have this thousands of year history, starting with Egypt and ending with the republics that are united to some extent as allies today. This compares to China's continuous 5,000 years of history that has all taken place in the same place by the same people for all of that time. But a lot of Americans might attempt to defend their history by reaching back all the way into Egypt, even though it was another people, another language, another place. A lot of Americans will attempt to say that they have a much longer history than that of the last couple hundred years since 1776. Anyways, I'm just sharing a little bit of culture with you today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.